would like to welcome Mr. Anshuman Verma sir for being with us for us webinar on analytics. So I request Ms. Shagun to start with.
Thank you, ma'am. A very warm and cheerful greeting to all. I, Shagun Raghav, welcome you all to this webinar organized by KCC Institute on an introduction using to analytics, a practitioner's viewpoint. The occasion is graced by the presence of our eminent speaker for the day, Mr. Anshuman Verma, Sir, Chief Marketing and Digital Officer, Pramerica Life, Alumni IIM Calcutta and DTU Delhi, and Dr. Professor Bhavna Agarwal Ma'am, Director KCC ILHT. Welcome, sir. Welcome, ma'am. Now, I request Pooja Ma'am to introduce our speaker for the day.
Thank you,
Ma'am.
Shruti. Good evening, all. Our speaker for today, Mr. Anshuman Verma, sir, is an engineering graduate from Delhi College of Engineering and has done his MBA from IIM Calcutta. Sir has a total work experience of 22 years, having worked in financial services, telecom, and consumer products. He has rich multicultural exposure, having worked in India, Sri Lanka, Dubai, and Riyadh. He was part of the startup team that launched a digital telco brand, Jovi, for Saudi Telecom, and is credited for the turnaround of Commercial Bank of Ceylon in Sri Lanka. His interest areas are strategy, marketing, business management, digital, customer lifecycle management, technology, and current affairs. Without much ado, I now request Mr. Anshuman Verma, sir, to share his foremost views. Sir.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's really a pleasure to come back always to campus and interact with the students. And as was mentioned, what I'm trying to cover here is how do you actually, use the theory that you learn in college in real life. And if you largely look at what I'm going to cover will be in the area of customer lifecycle management or customer relationship management. And in certain cases, it is also called as customer value management. This is more of a practitioner's view in terms of, if you graduate from college, if you were to join an organization, what sort of work or initiatives you can look forward to. And I hope it's of use to students. And I would love to, kind of take questions anytime in the presentation also. I have about 25 to 30 odd slides, which I'll cover. And I'll try and, kind of make it interactive, and I hope it's of use. So I'll just delve into the presentation and kind of start. So first of all, a hygiene check. Can you hear me? Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Welcome.
So I believe a lot of you would have heard this term called big data. It's become very, very famous in the last few years, ever since I believe McKinsey was the first one to kind of write an article on it. And after that, a lot of companies started, talking about it, although Google, Facebook, etc. were doing a lot of work. But historically, if you look at it traditionally, where has been the largest amount of data? Typically, it's been in the telecom space. So telcos, by virtue of the fact that, you have millions and millions of customers, and those millions and millions of customers are talking to each other or doing data services or using other services, you tend to generate a lot of data per se. So there are your network nodes which are generating data, your cell towers are generating data, your switch is generating data. There's a lot of data being generated. And then the question is, what do you do with it? What's really largely, the way this data was generated initially was an engineering perspective. So if I'm an engineer and I'm running the network, then I need to see is my network operating properly or not, etc. It's only later on, they started looking at more from a customer viewpoint and from a commercial viewpoint as to what to do with it. So let me just kind of start with the presentation. So what I'm going to cover broadly in terms of agenda is the context and try and set a context. what have been the actual glimpses of the customer analytics journey, how is the industry changing, and what we've learned, and what possibly might happen in the future. So this is a very basic and a simplistic slide. I'm sure you would have seen it in marketing. So these are the two very, very fundamental aspects that a marketer needs to look at. When I'm talking about a business to consumer sort of a proposition where I'm trying to acquire a lot of customers, as a marketer, you will first look at the acquisition funnel, acquiring new customer. And how does that happen? That starts primarily from your advertising, your awareness building, which is the top of the funnel here. It goes on to TOMA, which is top of the mind awareness. Then it boils down to ITP, which is intention to purchase. Then it goes to incremental customer market share, the actual people who come and purchase or sign up to your service, which is followed by early churn, which is 0 to 3 months. Somebody bought your SIM card, but very quickly left it, or was not happy, or was, thought I made a mistake. Why did I buy this, etc. Now, once the customer has been acquired, the customer is on your network, you spent money to acquire the customer, the focus of the marketer really shifts to what is known as a retention funnel. Now, what's the retention funnel all about? Is to essentially retain this customer. Now that I've spent money, I would like this customer to give me as much as revenue as possible, and elongate how long the customer stays with me as a brand. So the typical sort of things that you tend to measure in the first 3 to 12 months is AON, which is called age on network, how old the customer is. ARPU is average revenue per user, the churn of the customer, and complaints. So in the first 12 months. And plus 12 months after the customer has spent about 1 year with you, you would still look at the age on network, ARPU, churn, and complaints. But these are older customers, and the 3 to 12 months are the newer customers. Post which, when people are in the network, there is a certain experience that happens. Some of them churn out of which some tend to be loyal customers. Some are trapped. I've taken a SIM card from my company and I don't know, I don't like it, but I have no other option, or the rate plan is very good and I can live with the service. Some are bonded to the brand, and out of which there are certain advocates. I'm really passionate about it. I love this brand. I want to talk about it, etc. So this is typically what a marketer would look at in terms of acquisition and retention. And I think this is a very fundamental starting point, which a lot of people miss out. When they look at a marketing activity, they would say, okay, they are giving ads. Why are they giving ads? Why is it important? Why a certain message has come out, etc. So essentially, from a marketing standpoint or an organizational standpoint, you need to drive dominance in markets or segments by plugging irritants that reduce efficiency of this funnel. At the end of the day, if you see it's a funnel, you are losing customers at each and every stage. So as a marketer, what you would need to see is that the funnel should be as broad as possible, and you do not lose out either in terms of the acquisition or in terms of retention. Now, how would that translate to in an analytic sense? While there are a lot of commercial activities or marketing activities that you would do in terms of messaging, let's kind of then take the next step into see how does the maths come into this picture. So if I was to kind of lay it out and give you a sort of a snapshot in terms of what sort of analytics can you look at across the life cycle, there would be 3, 4, 5 buckets as I've indicated here. First is, even before I launch a particular service, I need to assess the market, right? How large is this market, which is market sizing? What are the sort of segments which are available in the market? And there could be various ways of segmenting the customers. You could segment by age, you could segment by other demographics, you could segment by affluence, you could segment by needs, you could segment by education, etc., depending on the product category. You would also look at product feasibility analysis. At on a unit cost basis, is my product making sense, not making sense, given a certain market size and projection of volume and a cost to serve. You could look at portfolio analysis. Do I want to launch a single product? Do I want to launch a multiple products, or do I need multiple SKUs in the market? What sort of price points are available? So if you take that in the FMCG context, you would have the small shampoo sachets, which are 1 rupee, 2 rupees sort of a price point, to the larger 1 liter, 2 liter shampoo bottles. So that is the sort of SKUs that you would look at. You would look at competition. What is competition offering in the market? What are they likely to do? And of course, a lot of this happens through primary customer service. So the first part of market assessment, more to do largely with market research and the application of market research and econometrics, essentially to assess the size of the market. If we get into now customer acquisition, you would need a certain customer acquisition strategy. Depending on whether you're doing B2C or B2B, you might need to do lead management for higher order customers. You would need to do campaign execution, either a plain marketing campaign or a one-on-one campaign, which I'll touch upon later also. You might need to do market mix modeling. If you're doing a postpaid product where you're giving credit, you might need to do underwriting analytics. So for example, if a customer comes and says, okay, I'm going to take a postpaid product, and what's the credit limit that you will give me? I want to go on a roaming trip. I'm going to Malaysia. And if the rates of roaming in Malaysia are very high, as a telco, you could suddenly have a bill of, let's say, 30,000 rupees in a week's time. Are you willing to give that sort of credit to that customer? So you need to have some sort of an algorithm which can, or some sort of a metric where you can do your underwriting analytics. In certain instances, you could do it after collection of the customer form, but in certain cases, you might need to do it on the spot. So a customer sitting on a terminal, he's at the airport, he wants to purchase a SIM. Would you give him a prepaid or a postpaid? So that sort of a decision needs to be taken. You might need to do product development, saying that basis the survey I've done, there is probably a need for a new sort of product in the market. And lastly, of course, what sort of pricing do I need to come into play? As was described previously in my slide, once I've acquired the customers, fundamentally need to grow, retain the customers with me as an organization. So you would look at things like cross-sell analytics. So if a customer has brought product X, can I sell product Y to the customer? I would need to look at churn and retention. So if a customer wants to cancel the connection or is likely to cancel the connection, what sort of solutions I have, and I'll describe this in greater detail later on. I would need to see the entire portfolio of customers as to how it is behaving and what do I need to do with that, and see the interaction of customers with each other. I would also need to do profitability analysis. And the reason you need to do profitability is that not every customer will be as profitable as the other one. So even customers who are having the same sort of revenue could not be the same in terms of profitability, depending on the usage characteristic of the customer. So if there is a customer who's calling your call center 10 times a month, will certainly not be as profitable as a customer who calls maybe once in 3 months, because there is a cost of serving that customer. So you need to look at profitability. You need to again look at segmentation, that am I serving the right segments or not. And very, very importantly, there is something known as an activation solution. So I'm sure a lot of you would have used credit cards, and you would have seen the moment you take a credit card, normally in the first time when you get the credit card, you get a lot of offer booklet with it, right? Saying that, you know, this offer. So that is known as an activation solution. The fact that they've sold a credit card to you, they've incentivized the salesperson to acquire you as a customer. They want you to go and experience the particular product. And therefore, it is important, like a credit card and a SIM sort of a market is very, very similar in terms of approach. They want the customer to experience and use the particular product. So therefore, you look at activation solutions, that I must not allow the customer to keep the SIM in his purse. It should be kept inside the phone, and it should be used. Similarly, a credit card should be activated. The customer should experience the entire cycle of using the credit card. Then you would look at an NPV solution, saying that, you know, today a certain customer is of a certain value, but over the life cycle of a customer, what sort of the total lifetime value of this customer? And in certain instances, that is a very, very important metric. So I would say that, let's say, today you have students who are going to graduate. Now, as students, they today might be lower in terms of value, but the moment they graduate and get a job, they would be far better placed. So the net present value of such customers would be higher compared to customers who are lower in terms of their educational qualifications, as an example. In terms of risk management, similar to, let's say, the underwriting that I mentioned, you might need an underwriting solution. You may need to look at fraud detection. Depending on whether customers will pay or not pay, you would need to look at collection scoring. You would need to have loss forecasting and exposure management algorithms. And lastly, and most importantly, if you are running a business or an organization to serve the customer, then you need to look at how do I manage and improve my operations. So I will look at capacity planning. So is my network good enough at a certain time when it is peaking? What is the quality of service that I offer to the customer? So I need to look at call volume forecasting, not only for the network, but even for my call centers, that during the day, what is the call volume forecast? How do I staff my call center accordingly, that I have more people during the time we have higher volume and lesser people when I have lower volume? Am I distributed properly, not distributed properly? And what quantify the process efficiency? Am I efficient in my processes? How do they benchmark? And so improving of operations in terms of efficiency, both cost and speed and services becomes a very significant differentiator. And let me just, after this longest slide, get you to, from an analytics perspective, what fits into each of these particular areas. So if I was to look at marketing solutions and illustrative benefits, I'll just go to the next slide because it's a, sorry. So as I described earlier, if I look at acquisitions, I want to maximize returns on acquisition costs. So what is the sort of expected benefit that I can get? You could look at easily saving up to 10% of acquisition cost, improve your product range, find out returns of each channel, and save up to 20% on channel costs. In terms of usage development, what the objective would be: increase profitability from existing customers, develop cross-sell programs. And typically what has been seen is increase revenue per customer by 15%, reduce campaign cost by 30%. Just a second. And develop the right products for various customer segments and increase cross-sell rates up to 20%. Churn solutions, two things, very, very importantly: identify customers most likely to churn. So this is like a forecasting algorithm or forecasting technique where you try and find out which customer is likely to churn out of my service, which customer is likely to leave. And what you do as an organization is you target those set of customers immediately and try and do something about it, because after having acquired these customers, it doesn't make sense to lose them. So you want to identify the customers, then you want to find out why are they churning out. So can I fix, as an organization, fix some of those reasons of churn? And with that, I need to develop some sort of a satisfaction measurement index to better understand or predict how am I doing at a gross basis as an organization. In terms of retention, I would want to look at, as an organization, retain profitable accounts, increase profitability, to develop a reactive retention strategy, retain profitable customers. So if you recall the NPV discussion that we just had, basis the NPV score or the current profitability projected, you would rank the customers in order of profitability or potential profitability, and then prioritize a set of customers, saying that, I would prioritize these customers versus I would not want to prioritize certain customers. In certain cases where customers are extremely negative in terms of profitability, or they're causing a loss and are not likely to give profit in the future, in certain instances, you may want such customers to churn out of your network or your organization. And these loss leaders can then join and become customers of other organizations and reduce their profit. So in certain instances, that also might be required, because if you have too many of such customers, what will essentially happen is that you will not be running profitable operations. You will not be making enough gross margin. Your ability to service these customers also will be compromised. In terms of pricing, you would typically do the optimization of trade-off between volume and margin, and see what sort of volume you get. You would also have to factor in cost, like what is my fixed capex cost, what's my opex cost, what sort of utilization percentage am I running at, and basis which you would also do certain experiments where it is important to know the elasticity of a certain service. So if I reduce my price by X%, the gain in volume of usage should be more than to offset the loss that I have by reducing my price. Otherwise, reduction of price per se will not give me any benefit, because what you typically see, it is an asymptotic curve. Up till a certain limit, when you reduce price, there is definitely some sort of elasticity which is seen. But after a while, when price becomes too low also, then people then don't typically bother about it, and beyond. So for example, a person may or may not be able to talk more than 5 hours or 8 hours in a day. So even if you were to give a cell phone free to everybody, there is a physical human limit to as to how much a customer can talk. So this elasticity curve becomes very important in terms of looking at where we are and what sort of pricing we need to follow. Lastly, optimization of operations, which I talked about, process efficiency, predicting call volumes accurately, customizing statements, and carry out more effective direct marketing. You can look at easily saving operational cost of up to 15%. And analytics really helps in all these particular areas. So let's just look at what is it that you would typically do now in analytics, coming down to the actual analytical solutions. So if I on the left hand side have acquisition of customers, I have increasing wallet share in current customers that we've talked about, and retention of existing customers. Now each of these particular business objectives can be met using the algorithms that are described on the right. So for example, to acquire new customers, I would need to do customer acquisition, improve efficiency of acquisition campaigns. For that, what I would do in terms of mathematics, if you look at the right hand column, is I would do response modeling, database marketing, and lookalike models. Now, a response model is essentially talking about if I've got a set of multiple product and I have a set of customers, which particular product should I sell to this set of customers that they're most likely to buy? So this is known as a response model. Who's likely to respond to a particular product offer or a service is known as a response model. Database marketing would be using your existing database of customers and then reaching out to them and prioritizing the set. And lookalike models is a very, very interesting thing. This is increasingly used in internet advertising also. So lookalike, as the name suggests in plain English, is I've got a set of customers who behave in a certain way. If I'm able to find equivalent set of customers to these people, that is a lookalike model. So let us say if I look at the students of KCC and I look at an equivalent institute, and I see that in KCC a certain product and service is being used, but in another institute which is similar to KCC, this product and service is not being used. So I would, as a marketer, say that, okay, one set of customers is using this particular product or feature, but the other set, which is very similar to this, is not using it. So I would look at this lookalike model and try and sell this particular product and feature to that lookalike set. From an internet advertising perspective, if I've got a set of customers or a large set of customers which I know behave in a certain way and I understand them, then using these customers as samples, I can upload this set of customers and create a lookalike response model on, let's say, a Google Ad Manager or a Facebook advertising platform. And using those services, I can find similar customers to those. To give you the same example, if I'm targeting the student market in the country and I already have a large set of student databases available with me, what I would then do as a marketer is to upload these databases on my campaign platform on internet and then do a modeling and find out people who are similar in terms of behavior to these set of customers and try and sell or advertise my services to them. Similarly, if I was to look at retaining customers, I would want to look at, if you go to the bottom, customer retention is important. I want to measure and reduce customer retention. And what I would do in terms of the analytics behind this is look at metrics like lifetime value that we talked about, that over the lifetime, what is the likely value that this customer is going to offer to me. I would look at churn and survival analysis studies, that what are these customers talking about, whether they will stay, not stay, whom should I prioritize, not prioritize. If I talk about, let's say, increasing wallet share in existing customers, I would look at from a perspective of marketing effectiveness, understand different sizes of different segments and drivers. And I would typically then look at market mix modeling, what sort of mix of products to a market basket analysis that I need to do. So this is broadly, if you look at it, what this slide talks about is the business objective. What is it that I need to do? And on the right, it tells you what is the sort of analytics you need to run in order to achieve your business objective. Is there any question that anyone would like to ask or so far on any of the things?
Yes, sir, we do have a few questions.
Sure.
So you would like to take it right here, or we can have it at the end?
I'm okay either way, or maybe we can probably take it at the end. Hopefully, I might be able to answer those during the course of the presentation. So,
okay, sir.
If you look at what is it that we actually did, now I've described the basic context and background. So this was a work that was done, in one of the Middle Eastern telcos that I've worked with. Initial objective was simple. We wanted to become the leading analytics-driven company in the region. So the first thing we did was, typically in any organization, you would have some sort of a basic CRM or a billing system where bulk of the customer data lies, because you have to generate a bill, you have to either prepaid or postpaid. And what we did was we first created a large data mart from that. We got a lot of data out of it. We conducted a customer unification exercise because typically companies tend to view a lot of customer relationships as product relationships. We did a unification exercise. We designed and launched analytic models for all our customers, consumer and enterprise. And to give you the sort of models that we looked at, we did customer macro segmentation, micro segmentation, roaming segmentation, customers who are coming from abroad, competitor segmentation, churn prediction, newcomer churn, seasonal churn predictions, social network analysis, tariff optimization, next best activity, and demand simulation. So this is how a data mart would look like. The hazy picture that you see at the background is a lot of data per customers. We had some 700 odd columns per customer in terms of various usage attributes, ratios that were pre-calculated. So you would look at external factors, customer profile, subscription behavior, usage behavior, interaction behavior, campaign behavior, payment behavior, and churn behavior of a customer, and had that readily available in terms of pre-built, pre-calculated metrics that one could use. Again, this is a sanitized slide, so it's not an actual slide, but this is representative, and so you will find a lot of data which probably doesn't make sense. But this is a sort of, if I was to call it, a customer card that we would build. We would say that there is a customer, he uses a certain plan, how long has he been with the organization, what is his value segment, how profitable is this customer. And in terms of segmentation of usage, so his macro segmentation is he's an international chatter, what time of the day is he using the cell phone, what time of the week, what sort of a product usage is he doing, what destination is he looking at, what sort of interaction does he have, what are his handset usages, services usages, what sort of social networks does he belong to, what is his role in those social networks, what is his personal churn score, what is the churn score of his network, what are the factors, for example, which are driving up churn risk. So can I look at those and control this? So for example, if you look at it, he has complained 3 times in the last 3 months. His observed usage drop is above 50%. He's increasingly not using my service, for example. Factors which are driving down data usage is driving down risk is that he's using more data. And if I was to sell him additional products, then his risk would go down. So basis these cards and the analysis, you would then run campaigns, and I'll come to how you would run those campaigns. And this was done for each and every customer, right? So if I recall correctly, we had some around 11, 12 million customers at that point in time. So we did it for the entire lot. This is what I mean by a social network analysis, which is nothing but if you use graph theory, there are a certain set of people who would call each other. So if I was to put a numerical measure that I've called you, you've called me, or I've texted you, you've texted me back, etc. Now this has changed a bit since that time because of the fact that internet apps like WhatsApp and other texting apps have become very, very popular. So the role of SMS per se has gone down. But initially SMS used to be a fairly good medium of communication. But nevertheless, if you were to even restrict it to cell phone calling, for example, you would have, so for example, what you would do, you would look at who's a central person in a certain aggregate or a community, person with the highest connections. Somebody who's very popular. So as a student, everybody knows, everybody comes and talks to him. And he's the person who can influence a lot of public opinion. So even if this customer was to have, let's say, a lower value score, but the fact that the customer has a higher social score, I would give this customer extra care and due weightage, because this customer has the ability to influence a lot of customers in his or her social network. So that's the reason you would typically tend to do this social network analysis. And so basis this analysis, you would create social network communities that would give them a number, you would assign roles to people, and you would use that consequently in your campaign analysis. We even looked at where customers lived, what they did, and this was also important from an operations perspective, that if I had certain set of high value customers, was my network working there, not working there, what was the sort of complaint. So you would overlay this map with a lot of other features, which is a completely separate topic, which we can discuss in terms of how do you manage your network from a value-based optimization perspective. We looked at international roamers, because roamers tend to give you a lot of revenues. They'll come from the airport, you latch them on, which all hotels do they go to, is my network correct there, not there, how much sort of a usage I have for them. Yeah, and this is an important slide. Now, I've done all the fancy maths as a marketer. I've looked at categorizing customers, etc. But at the end of the day, you need to make money for the company. How do you actually make money for the company? So this biggest, longest slide actually talks about that particular process, and I'll try and explain this. So if you focus on the blue part, essentially, not really getting into the boxes below. The first would be campaign concept definition. Now, what is a campaign? Campaign is a certain set of customers who I want to take a certain action on. So as we discussed earlier, let us say there is a set of customers who are heavy voice users but are not data users, and I want to get these set of customers to use data services. So this is the basic concept of a campaign, saying that I want to promote data usage services. You would then do a commercial assessment in terms of looking at this particular set of customers, what sort of a campaign you would want to do. And the idea of doing that would be that you would need to do a business case analysis, that does that make sense to do this campaign commercially, or am I just burning money as an organization? Because it's the easiest thing to give things free. People will come, they'll take it, and then they'll go away, right? So once the commercial assessment is done, you would then look at the proper business case development. You would finalize the assumptions, finalize what sort of metrics or revenues you want to do, and get the formal confirmation of the business case. On the fourth step, you would get into campaign specification. What is the actual campaign, and how will I run that campaign? So for example, in the Middle East, a lot of people, because Friday is a holiday, will recharge typically on a Friday in the first half. So there are two options I have as a marketer. Either I hit them on Friday evening, or at best Saturday morning, saying that, dear customer, we notice you have not recharged this Friday. If you were to recharge for X amount of value, we will give you certain freebie or certain gift or extra credits or extra minutes. So this is a campaign that you have really pinpointed, saying that, okay, this is my criteria. These are the set of customers who will come into it, and this is how this campaign will run. Similarly, for the data campaign, depending on how you want to do the campaign, you could either do a discount campaign, or in certain cases, similar to the shampoo sachet example that I used, I could give a service free to customers for a limited period of time. I would say, sir, dear sir, ma'am, here is, let's say, 1 GB data free for the next 15 days. Please go ahead and experience it. So what will happen is that some of these customers will go and experience this service that they've never experienced before. And these sort of campaigns, the data campaign was one of the most successful campaigns that we ever ran, simply because people were afraid to, or they thought, this is too expensive, etc. But once they got used to using a certain service and they saw the benefits of that service, we could see a perceptible change in customer behavior. And so the fifth part that I was talking about is actually the execution. How do you actually execute this on scale? And while this might seem simple, if you've got 10 people and you have to sell a product to 10 people, you can individually go and talk to them and say, dear sir, ma'am, would you like to buy this? A typical one-on-one sales process. But if you've got, let's say, 500,000 customers to reach in a day, how will you do that? So you need behind this something known as a campaign management platform, where what you do is that you take your campaigns and you load your campaigns into the platform, either manually as a list, you define all the criteria, or if the campaign platform is connected to your analytics, it picks up basis the specifications that you've given as a campaign. So pick up, for example, all the people who are Friday recharges, who have not recharged this Friday, and push them campaign number XYZ. So it will pick up that set of segmented customers, look at whether they've recharged or not recharged, and on that basis, pick up a certain campaign and push out that campaign to them. Once that campaign happens, you would want to monitor and say that, okay, campaign is running. Is it running correctly? Not running correctly? Because especially the first time you run a campaign for a few days, is this something that we missed out? Do we need to correct the pain points and do some changes, etc., that we've not looked at, or has the customer behavior changed? And finally, you terminate a campaign and then you do a post-campaign analysis, saying that what was our original business case versus the original business case? Where are we? How is the campaign done commercially? What has it met its objectives or not? And that becomes the feedback loop. So you started with what are my business objectives as a marketer? What sort of analytics that I can do? How do I build it? And then this particular slide talks about how do I execute that campaign? And I'll take you through some illustrative examples of how you would kind of execute that. So the journey was a difficult one. It took time. It required a lot of work. It required a lot of investment. And I think it was a sort of a leap of faith, because in this sort of a journey, initially you need to spend a lot of money in terms of capital equipment in order for it to, kind of build the infrastructure for it to go live. And so what we succeeded essentially in doing was developing a data-driven campaign culture, launching analytical-driven campaigns and generating revenue. Nice small team. We were at that time contributing to about 7 to 8% of the gross revenue of the organization. Typically, you would get around 2 to 3%, but I think we would double the benchmark. And the focus going forward was getting more offers, reaching a higher desired percentage of customers with offers, because there was a high do not disturb list. Changing business as usual with some segments, and overcoming certain system limitations. Now let's look at how the industry has changed, and what is it that from a strategy perspective, this would be interesting, is what the telcos have not actually done and what the Googles and Facebook have done, and how the telcos have actually missed out a lot of opportunity. So what I actually described to you is the pink thing in the middle was a core transactions, right? Which was essentially what the network generates, and which is highly structured, and that is what we use to do our analytics. Apart from that, there is a lot of new data that customers started generating, which was largely unstructured, which is online sales, downloads, call notes, usage of apps like WhatsApp, web chats, blogs, social networks, browsing behavior. And basis the browsing behavior, as Google calculates your need-based segments, what do customers think about? So for example, it'll tell you that this particular set of customers are fond of international travel or international destinations, etc. This is a lot of stuff where on the right-hand side, which the so-called internet companies were looking at. And so the way this splits and where the telcos have actually either not collaborated or missed out is that Google knows what you want. Facebook pretty much knows all about you, provided you use Facebook. However, the telco knows what you're doing and where you're doing it. Now, the pipe this data goes through is the telco pipe, right? So a collaboration between a telco and an internet firm would have been a very ideal combination in order to, derive extreme value from this particular thing. So that's, as far as the telcos versus the Google and Facebook is concerned. And lastly, what we've learned and where are we headed in the future? So let me then come to some sort of actual examples and what you known as real-time churn management. So what I described earlier was churn, which was not real-time in nature, where we calculated, we reached out to the customers. This pertains to typically usage and service experience that customers might have with your service. So, for example, again, pseudo name Mary Jane has been a customer for 4 years. She does not talk much or even SMS, but uses her mobile most of the time to connect to the internet, has never made a complaint. Half of our social network is using our competitor. Typically, our churn model would predict her as a low-risk customer. But let's look at what was her service experience recently. So she called recently on the 15th saying that, her 3G is not working very well. After calling the call center, she happened to visit the competitor's website from her mobile. The network detected a 3G connection drop on the 17th again. In traditional retention, she would have come in the retention campaign by the 1st of July and would have already churned out by that time. However, if I was doing a more real-time sort of an approach, I would typically, as an organization, if not the same day, try and reach the customer the immediate next day, saying that I'm giving you free 3G for 1 month, and I would retain this particular customer. See, the opportunity when you have service disruption for such set of customers is very small, because this, in a sense, is not predictable behavior. This is a random behavior that's happened. However, the customer may or may not be happy, and there is a strong likelihood that the customer may churn. So here the approach has to be different in terms of how you structure your systems to measure, monitor, and deliver campaigns on it. Let's look at a real-time upselling, cross-selling sort of an example. 24-year-old customer has significant high data and voice usage, roams abroad frequently in shopping areas. A next best activity model predicts her social media bundle interest as medium. On the 13th, she upgraded her data package. Her social network leader subscribes to the social network bundle, which means people in her social network also took the same bundle. She started doubling her visit to Twitter. And then suddenly, if we were to go to the traditional network retention program, she would get a social media offer, but is not interested by the 1st of July and would churn out. However, if the next day or the same day, I was able to reach the customer saying, I'm giving you a social media offer, why don't you kind of look at it? It becomes very contextual to what the customer really wants and offers a delight to the customer. Otherwise, if there is, let's say, a case of overbilling, or she's not happy with the sort of service that she's using, then you might lose out the customer. And so in terms of, if I was to call this real-time marketing, is that what you need to do is to identify these triggers that I described. What is it that it might happen, enabled by big data. And some of these examples would be that you would look at customer by value tier, high, medium, and mass, or high, medium, low. You would look at the sequence of events defined as, let's say, X number of call drops in a day, how many minutes the customer had to wait at the call center. You could look at by behavior segment, data savvy, traditional voice, SMS, chatter, look at certain other sequence of events, or by age on network or tenure, new customer or existing customer, and then define the set of triggers for them. So certain set of triggers or experiences that the customer might have will increase the immediate churn risk. And then you need to take action as an organization to kind of arrest that. So if I were to take an example, the first example, a customer's network increased, customer upgraded the data package, customer exceeded the daily data usage by 50%, which means that if they were to go above their bundle, they're likely to get overcharged. This is a cross-sell opportunity, saying that let's upgrade this customer and sell them the right data package. And basis that, you would have a very, very good sort of an uptake. Similarly, you would have other trigger sequences and upsell opportunities. And how does this typically work? Now, you might have a multitude of these triggers. So what you would have essentially is a set of products. You would have a set of actions. You would have a set of conditions, what is happening. Then you would define the channel, the segment, and how do you target them. Basis all these conditions, you would then have a set of offers that are rolled out to the customer basis this particular triggers. And so around each trigger inside the universe, details around the actions then need to be defined. So if I, for example, want to, let's say, promote extra data bundle usage offers before the billing date, the product would be all postpaid customers. Action would be data usage. Any subscriber exceeding limit in the first 10 days of the month, it would be a mass market campaign. The channel could be an SMS or an email. The product is a data bundle. The action is an upsell. And promotion of the most attractive data offer to the customer. That's how it would typically get defined. And so this is how a typical dashboard would look. You would have triggers on the left. You would have all the cases of the triggers. What are the cases? What are the response? What's the cost of giving that offer? What's the impact? And whether it meets the ROI condition or not. And where it's being fulfilled. What is the cases per date? And so the key takeaways is that customer analytics definitely can and does drive growth for operators or telcos. The field is ever evolving. You had a lot of new technology, new techniques that keep coming in, which is nice and interesting and very, very exciting. A lot of insight, almost everything about the customer can be had with analytics, which is behavior, wants, needs, opportunities, risks. The key challenge essentially, again, is finding the right resources. It's all about people. Because in an analytics team, you need various diverse skill sets to come together. You need people who at one time, are good in technology. So it's about processing a lot of data, which means I need to take out the data from my core system. I need to bring it somewhere. I need to process it. As described in the triggers, I need to probably process data in real time. So that's a separate skill set and a separate thing that you need to do. Once that is done, I would need people who are good in maybe statistics or have a knowledge in terms of how to process this. Some people who are good in things like Python or SAS, which are basically packages that you use or languages that you use to process this data and make sense out of them. People who are good in algorithms, etc. The other is within the organization is, of course, changing employee mindset. So why should I do this? Why is this maths required? We did it in college. Why do we need to do it in the organization? Then improving internal operations that, if you notice something, how do you kind of change things and meet the customer expectations? And lastly, very, very importantly, it is a high technology operation. At a larger scale, you need help from the technology side in order to run this if you're doing it on a continuous basis. That's broadly it. And in terms of maybe concluding this, I would say that this typically goes in 3 phases. The first is, you get your data integration, you get your basic team in place, you build your data marts, you do certain pilots. The second phase is extensive business analytics, predictive analytics. And the third phase is basis the experience you have. You run this and you are able to run this as a daily operation. So this journey typically for a large organization, we're talking about a 12-month sort of a journey. So this is what I had to share from a practical standpoint. How do you approach this area? And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, sir. That was for sharing this comprehensive insight into your journey of using analytics in marketing. I'm sure our students would have definitely taken a takeaway from here. And with that, the very first question from our viewer is, do you find any difference in use of analytics in the financial services sector and consumer products?
So yes, there is obviously a difference because the nature of the product and the service is different. So while the broad approach would be similar, so the journey in terms of, the fact that even in the financial services space, you would have something known as, let's say, the core banking application. There would be a core credit card application. There would be a trade finance application. So you would have these various applications which do various functional areas. Principally, what you would do first is to gather all this data in one place and figure out that at a customer level, what is it? How is the customer interacting with my particular organization? The techniques that you would apply would be similar. Obviously, the use cases would differ. Right? Credit card, for example, would be very similar to a telco case, fairly similar, because the life cycle is very, very similar to taking a SIM card and buying it. Whereas, let's say a loan product or deepening of a banking relationship, etc., would have a different approach. However, the fundamental approach in terms of how you process and measure would be similar. Obviously, because the industry is different, the use cases are different. What is it that I want to use analytics for is different. The approach would be different. However, the fundamentals are the same. I still want to acquire customers. Once the customers are acquired, I want to, kind of activate them. I want to retain the customers. I want to maximize their value. I want to manage my operations. So the principle remains the same. What you actually execute will differ.
Okay, thank you so much for answering that, sir. Moving on, the next question that we have from our viewers is, how do you ensure reliability of sources while collecting data?
Very good question. So this broadly falls under the area of what I would known as data governance. So while you're officially defining your data sources, it is very, very important to agree on a couple of things. One is common definitions. So normally in organizations, what happens is even the definition of revenue, you could have multiple definitions. You could have a certain, let's say, a gross revenue. Somebody talks gross revenue, somebody talks net revenue, somebody talks revenue minus a certain component or adding a certain component. So first of all, what I would say is that a data dictionary or a data glossary needs to be agreed, which is to say that all of us ascribe to these definitions. This is how we describe what we say when we say something. The second is that you need to then formally map all your data sources on a formal way, saying that where is this data point collected? How does it come? How is it stored? Who's supposed to forward it and get it to a particular place? And how is it supposed to be processed? Having said that, during the course of time, if you were to explore the data over a certain period of time, if there are any known cases of, let's say, data quality, and if I have any particular issues, you need to have a standard operating procedure in terms of how you would handle those cases. So for example, in the postpaid scenario, many times you get a form and customers are entering that data entry, associates are entering the data entry form. Customer may or may not give their email, or people are lazy. So in most cases, the most common email ID we had in certain sets of customers are noemail@x.com. Right, so that has to be flagged off. So you would do that at various stages. You would, while you might notice in the analytical side, because you are the end recipient, this culture has to propagate upwards. So for example, if I'm consequence of that, if I'm doing a certain data entry operation and I know that a customer is based in the city of Mumbai, then only the PIN codes of Mumbai should be allowed in the billing system to be entered. It should not happen that the customer is based in Mumbai, but the system allows you to enter PIN codes of Chennai. So that comes under the definition of master data management, saying that a certain set of values will correspond only to another certain set of values and will be managed centrally to certain set of people. So it is this whole data governance piece that becomes very, very critical and important in order to ensure that the data quality is managed.
Thank you again, sir. The next question that we have is, today the amount of data produced by large business enterprises is growing at a very fast rate. What they should do to tackle the challenge of storing such a huge data?
Again, interesting question. You're right, the data is increasing, but there are two broad approaches that you would do. One, luckily at the same time, the cost of storage and the cost of computing is falling. So that kind of offsets this particular issue that I need to process, a large volume of data. Secondly, what has also happened is that you would have, modern databases which have come up, which allow you to consequently compress that data and store it historically. So one is that, as you saw in the data mart example, if I have pre-processed values available for the customer, then probably I don't need absolute values in certain instances. So though that needn't be stored for beyond, let's say, a 24-month or a 36-month cycle. again, it also depends on what does the regulator say. So there will be certain transactional data in the billing system that will be stored for 5 years, 7 years, depending on the law of the land. However, from an analytics perspective, you would need to store summaries, maybe not the transactional data for so long. And as I said, the other aspect, of course, is that cost of computing and storage is coming down. So you'd use a combination of these factors to come up at an optimal value.
Okay, thank you again, sir. Moving on, the next question is, we know that companies have sources to collect big data, but we are eager to know how do they decide what to do with in order to use it effectively for their business goals?
So you need the way to look at this is to look at the use case or the business problem. What is it that my business objective is as an organization? So each organization at a certain point in time will have a different business objective. For certain organizations, it could be that I need to increase my acquisition. For certain organizations, it could be that I am a very large organization. I probably need to retain my customers more profitably. So if you were to, let's say, compare two banks, if I was to, let's say, hypothetically look at ICICI Bank, which is a large bank, it of course has a huge acquisition engine. It may or may not want to acquire a set of customers which probably a PSU bank acquires, but it would want to acquire customers with a minimum level of threshold of affluence. So when they do their acquisition planning, they would look at saying that, okay, the minimum benchmark that I need to acquire a certain set of customers is, this sort of salary or this sort of affluence or this sort of areas where I'm more dominant and more present in. Or the reverse could be that I've opened up in a new market, but I want to get a certain set of customers, and therefore the approach that I follow as an organization is different from others. Once you're clear as to what your business objective is, then you would decide appropriately where to get the data, how to process it, not vice versa. I mean, that would be then just an academic exercise, which is also important, but that would not happen in an organizational context.
Okay, thank you again, sir. Sure. The next question we have is, what are the key skill sets and behavioral characteristics of a data analyst?
I guess the key skill set is, of course, you need to be familiar, and it's not easy day in, day out to process a lot of data. It becomes a challenge. So one basic thing is that you need to love doing it from a behavioral standpoint. In terms of skill set, I believe that you're dealing with a large amount of data. So you need to learn a lot of tools. The basic first tool that you need to learn is Excel. Excel, but will allow you up till a 1 million row sort of a set. Beyond a point, it will not go. Larger than that, you will need to get into data processing languages like Python or in certain cases SAS. R is also a good option. Personally, I'm not a big fan of R because I find Python to be a better source. Then there are other commercial tools which are also available, which allow you, to process data. The other skill is that you may or may not want to know about databases, but you should have basic familiarity that how is this large volume of data coming? Where is it stored in a database? It's not depending on the type of data you have, you might need to use a different database technology. So if I'm processing a large volume of data and I don't need an immediate result, then I will go for, let's say, probably a relational database. However, if I have to, as I gave you the example of a real-time application where I need to process the data immediately, which is related to the concept of data velocity, then I would probably need to go for a real-time database for those set of particular data which is processed immediately. As you said in your previous question, depending on the volume of data is rising, if it is becoming too large that a relational database cannot handle it, you might want to look at Hadoop clusters or some of the newer open source database technologies which have come in. In a data science team or analytics team, you would have try to keep a combination of people who can address these particular various aspects. It's difficult to really find people who can do all of them. If as a professional, you want to train yourself on databases, ETL tools, extract, transform, and load tools, getting the data, processing it, then I think the value that you would command as a professional would be far higher. And of course, general familiarity in terms of statistics is important. So once you process the data, you still need to run some statistics on it. So when let's say, talk about response model, you're actually running a statistic to say that who's more likely to buy a certain set of product. So that again means that you need to either do econometrics or you need to do some sort of advanced statistics to get some idea of what to use in a certain scenario.
Thank you, sir. So one of our faculty member has a question for you.
Sure.
The question is, she wants you to share one real life example where analytics gave you entire different perspective to look for solution which you would not have thought if not used analytics.
So yeah, so this is not covered in this particular presentation, but a certain point in time, we had a huge fall in our international traffic. And we were wondering what's happened. Has it gone to competition? How has suddenly lost traffic? And then we actually started doing, in one of the slides, if you look at it, some deep packet inspection analysis. And we found that, the data usage had all gone up, not as much, but wherever we saw the loss of traffic, the data usage had gone up. So this actually told us that possibly at that point in time, people were not buying the international calling because it was expensive in that particular geography, and had switched to certain VoIP or voice over IP or voice over internet kind of clients. So that normally from traditional analytics, we would not have got it.
Okay, thank you again, sir. With that, we want to wrap this session for today. Sure. It was indeed an interactive and informative session. And I'm extremely grateful to you, sir, for your kind presence. And it was a pleasure to hear you. And on the behalf of all the viewers, the organizers, and the KCC Institutes, I would like to extend a very hearty vote of thanks to you. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure interacting with everybody. And I look forward to many more interactions with the students.
Same here, sir. We look forward to meet you in person in our campus, sir.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Sir. Good evening.
Thanks. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.